Mindset Athlete Podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian and owner of James Robert Fitness, which is an online training, nutrition, and mindset coaching business. First of all, I'd like to thank Lauren Williams for suggesting this quote to the show. An athlete is a mindset. It's how you prepare, think, and execute. Not because of some elite status or physical stature. Anybody can be an athlete. By Chris Harth. And each week on the Mindset Athlete, we like to bring you inspirational athletes, a message, or experts talking about human optimization to teach you how to change your perception of your mindset and become 1% better. And on today's show, I've got Bryan Falchuk. He is a best-selling author, speaker, and life coach. He has faced many adversities and learned how to overcome and achieve. From obesity to running marathons, from a career struggles to success as a C-level executive, from watching illness threaten his family to finding lasting health. He has been through many lessons he used to develop his unique approach to inspiring others to succeed. So welcome onto the show, Bryan.
Thanks for having me on, James.
So beyond the initial introduction that I have given you there, is there any little bit of a nugget you'd like to share with my audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's in that transformation, the obesity to the marathon, which was, I always say, like, it wasn't just this impossibility or this really hard thing. It was so impossible I wouldn't even have put it on the list to scoff at and be like, no, I'll never do that. I mean, it's just like, okay, that's ridiculous. I'm this fat guy. I hate running. My knees hurt. I'm too big. I'm not good at it. Like, what's the point? And lo and behold, it was such an obvious thing I had to do and wanted to do. Just part of that transformation, which is pretty cool. And it was all triggered for me. Like my backstory is one of anxiety, which is what led to my obesity. A lot of us find ourselves seeking wholeness in something else and something temporary. And so I kept turning to food, and food's actually not a treatment for anxiety, maybe in the moment, but not really. And it actually only made me have more issues with myself, more self-loathing, self-discomfort, all that, and the negative talk. And it spiraled out of control. At the same time, my wife became very seriously ill to the point that she wasn't expected to make it through the summer. This is in 2011. And we had a 2-year-old at the time. And so it was this culmination, this doctor's call, when he was sort of like, yeah, there's nothing left. There's really nothing to do. And then he was like, I'm going on vacation. Talk to you later. Which is a little bit strange to go there on the call. So we were really left empty-handed. And all of a sudden it's hitting me is, I'm most likely about to be a widower, single father to a young child. And I'm miserable, and I'm not living the way I want to live. And I'm definitely miserable to live with. And so all that, that's not helping my wife. It's certainly not setting my son up for success. And this part took me a while, but it's not setting me up for success. I just wasn't ready to face my own self-worth yet. I don't think I valued myself enough to be willing to put myself on a pedestal. And I don't mean that egotistically, but I do think, whether you're standing on the top of the podium officially or in your mind, seeing yourself as worthy, as successful, as a finisher is really powerful. And so I just made a shift. Like, I came alive in that moment, and I took a few key things in my life that were out of control and brought them back into control. Or not back, just into control. So I started talking to someone about the anxiety. I took some steps around some career issues that were going on. The company I was working at, just becoming very political, and I don't care for that. But most importantly, I knew better physically and diet-wise, and I wasn't doing. And that's what I changed. That was most dramatic. So I went from, at that time, I was 222 pounds. I came down to 185 from July 1st to October 19th. So it was my 33rd birthday. And that was my goal weight. And I was like, well, I got here way faster than I thought. I was expecting to do it by the end of the year. And I felt amazing. Like, every workout, I was exhausted, but I was so charged up. Like, I felt this purpose. And for the first time ever, I loved the workouts. Like, I had been 100 pounds overweight, and I lost the weight, but I did it through almost bulimia. Like, I was purging through exercise instead of, sticking my finger down my throat. And that did not lead to a healthy relationship with exercise or with sport. And of course, my whole childhood, my relationship to exercise and sport was incredibly negative because I was so far, behind everyone else, and I was panting and wheezing, and I couldn't do it. Like it was terrible. It was embarrassing, in shirts versus skins as a kid, and the fat kid has the biggest boobs in school, like it's not a good scene. So my whole feeling around exercise was incredibly negative, and now it wasn't. It was empowering. And so it was like every day I couldn't get enough. And so the more I did, I picked up a bike. I started cycling. I started running, which is not something I ever foresaw. And I really just came alive. And so I started getting into events and did century rides. I've done, a bunch of different running events, and culminating in the marathon eventually. And I should say my wife is still alive. That's something I sometimes I just keep moving with the story, but she is still here. Our son's not 2 anymore. That's changed. But it's just life is completely different. And people noticed and started to reach out for help. And so I started to coach people. I got certified as a personal trainer, and it's just continued on. That's the somewhat nutshell-ish version of me and sport, which are 2 really good friends now, versus frenemies maybe, or maybe I was just using it before just to try to not be fat again, which is it's not the best motivation. Like, hi, I'm Bryan. I'm trying not to be fat. How are you? Like, that's
but wouldn't you agree that's most people's perception towards it?
Yeah.
It is. Or initially.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's my point. I was listening to an episode of another podcast, and this guy, Rich Roll, and he's talking about running. And he was saying, it's not like you go for one run and then you're hooked and it's done and you're great at it. It's like it builds over time, and you don't really see progress. You may not be able to run more than a minute at a time when you're starting out. That's, that makes it tough. So I think that's part of why we all feel the way we do. And certainly in the US, obesity, I mean, I know this is a big focus for you. Obesity is a serious problem. And, it's almost like it's fashionable to make fun of eating right and exercising. It's fashionable to have a distaste for it. People go to the gym and they kind of like put on an iPad with a show, or they'll watch a TV show and just sort of mindlessly work out, which is what I was doing for years. Like, I was working out that whole time. It was just pointless. But you go in with purpose and you start to develop a different relationship to it, and you give it a chance, and you find that actually it is empowering. You have to find what you enjoy. People are like, oh, I hate doing that. Okay, well, why are you doing that? Let's find there's a million different exercises you can do. You can take dancing classes. Guess what? That is exercise. Like, there's so many different, I mean, look at your career, like how many different sports. I know we tried to name them when I had you on my show, but it's a lot. You did so many different kinds of sports.
5 or 6?
5 or 6 at a professional level in the Paralympics.
There's only 3 at Paralympic level, but still, that's to be able to chop and change like that. You see it more in Paralympic sport, but Olympic sport, people would probably hold you in high esteem, because it's like, well, it's one achievement to do that in one, let alone do it in another. Whereas Paralympic sports, we probably take it for granted. It's like, oh, you're multi-talented. Good on you.
Yeah. But to the point, you play around, you do different things that you enjoy. And that's just it. As if, I had someone I was working with who was like, well, I know I have to do, there's 2 things she had kind of drilled into her head. You have to run, and you have to do at least an hour of cardio. And I was like, there's no rule that says you have to run. There's tons of other things you can do. Not everyone should run. I think many can, but not everyone can, or not everyone should. And if you don't enjoy it, that's a great reason not to do it. Let's find something else. And I don't know where this hour came from, but your body's clock is not that exact. If you do, I always say this, like, if you do 59 minutes of cardio and then you quit, do you think your body's like, oh, no weight loss for us? Like, we're no muscle building. We're good. Like, stop everything. As soon as you hit 60 minutes, your body just like kicks into this amazing shape. It doesn't work like that. So we have to let go of some of these preconceived notions that I think are taking away from our enjoyment in it.
Yeah, but a lot of that's based on myths, bias, preconceived ideas placed in the wrong perspective. It's you've put authority towards the wrong person, and you believe what they've said. Okay, it's probably more and more difficult and more maybe discerning to be able to do that, because it's a gray area. Somebody says they're an influencer, be it based on their popularity, I will call it, on social media. They will say something, that's their opinion, you'll take that as factual. And I think we discussed that a little bit on your show in terms from a different perspective. But that's where some other people's intuitions, beliefs, and ultimately their ideology is going to be based on. It's based on somebody's opinion. I'm probably putting this person on a pedestal because they're popular.
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe going a bit old school, learning yourself, going out and finding that information, and putting option A versus option B. Yeah. And if you don't agree with either of them, you come up with option C. But I think people are less inclined to want to do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it goes back to my earlier point about how much we value ourselves. Like if you see yourself in a negative light, if you see yourself as incapable, well, then you are. Because in your mind, you're holding yourself back. So of course you're going to look to others for guidance. And it's not to say others are bad or wrong, but ultimately those ideas still come back to your brain. And if you're not processing it from your perspective and what's right for your body and your life, then if nothing else, is not going to be sustainable, because you're living someone else's version of what you should be doing. If you don't bring that into yourself and value yourself enough to make those decisions for yourself, you're going to quit. And that's why you see so many people who all-star athletes through high school and university. And then you go to the reunion with them and they're 40 and it's like, wow, that's a huge gut. Where did that come from? These are people who were like at the pinnacle of fitness and they lose it because that wasn't really who they are, or they weren't in touch with it in a way that was going to sustain through their life. And so I'm in my 40s and there's a lot of us who have sort of come alive, and like there's a lot of triathletes who are in their 40s. Because there's like this shift we go through where, some people keep it the whole way, but there's a lot who sort of like get back in touch, not just with sport, but actually with themselves, that triggers the connection to sport. And it's fantastic. I was at a triathlon in September, and the number of competitors whose number, they make you write your age on your calf. The number of folks who have a 4 to start is tremendous. And the people on the podium or close to being on the podium, a lot of them had 4s in their age. And it's really interesting to see it. And a lot of them were couples. So you see couples going at it together and reinforcing each other and supporting each other. It's a fantastic feeling. The amount of self-worth in that tent for the award ceremony afterward, it's really infectious. And that's something we actually can all get to, but it doesn't just happen. You do have to do work. You do have to be willing to see yourself in a different way. And sometimes that's scary. A lot of us are carrying things around with us that are keeping us from feeling that way, maybe experiences we've had through life. And it's definitely hard. I'm not diminishing that at all. And it's worth facing them, because the payback's huge. It's your life,
But Bryan, obviously we talk about longevity, consistency, and all the words of work ethic that go with it. Why do people, in your opinion, and obviously at the end of the day, it's your opinion. Yeah. Why are they looking for that magic pill or the quick fix?
Yeah. And we definitely, we got into this when you were on my show. This is the norm in so many aspects of life. I mean, in business too, is like, you see people like, how can I just make $1 million? As soon as that word just comes up, we have to be a little bit aware that the next words are probably not the right answer. Just do this, just do that. We want things to be easy and we want them to be done. And societally, that is absolutely the message that's reinforced. Social media, marketing, all of it is about, here, this is easy. I mean, the paradigm in marketing has shifted from talking about the benefits of things and the values of things to how hard life is without it. And so we've gotten in this mindset of, there's ridiculous ads, kind of like infomercials on TV of people struggling with, like getting their keys into the car, and their hands are shaking and they're like scratching the car up and they drop the keys. And I'm like, that might happen once in a while, but that's not the norm for how people like get their keys out to get into their house. Or they're like, they just make it look like life is so difficult and ridiculous. But this one product, wow. Now look at how easy everything is. That's the norm in marketing these days. It's about, there's something really negative that you don't want anymore, and this is the solution. And it's the same in politics. It's not, these are the things I stand for. This is what I'm going to do to raise the country up, or the the municipality or whatever it is the politician's running in. It's my opponent is terrible. They're corrupt. They're backwards. They're ruining everything. I'm the fix. Vote for me. Well, how are you the fix? Why are you any good? No, you're just saying that's terrible and there's a fix. It's this fix mentality is pervasive. And so we look for these quick things in a very reductionist way. So like, your focus on diet, kale was like the magic pill. It was like, well, you just need to eat more kale and everything will be great. Right? It's like just eating kale does not make you fit and healthy. And if you only eat kale, you will actually be unhealthy because you'll be missing all kinds of other things you need. So, okay, then it's kale, but then you also take this vitamin. If you just take this one vitamin, everything, no. Again, it's reductionist, but that's what we're programmed to hear. So if you come back to the self, you can start to break through that. Ask yourself, like, is that really going to do me any good? What's going to happen 10 years from now? Is that still going to be serving me? Will I have understood any of the things I need to get myself there? These are tougher questions that most of us don't want to spend the time thinking about. We just want the answer. We want to move on. And there's moments where that's fine. You just kind of want to disconnect your brain and veg out. But to run your life that way is a different story. Like I'm all for those moments of separation. But on the whole, that should not be the way you've programmed your life. You're going to wake up and be like, what the hell happened to me? Nobody wants that. That's the whole premise of a midlife crisis is you have this wake up moment and you're like, how did I get here?
Well, it's generally speaking, I won't say mine is probably not midlife crisis because my moment, I'll call it in the spotlight of when it happened, it was in my 30s. But I think it was probably my body saying to me, well, you're going so far from what we know. Yeah. You're not listening to the warning signs. We've got to kind of push you over the cliff now and for you to, or close to it. Yeah. And then you wake up, like you were saying, Brian, in terms of, how did I get here? I don't like where I'm going. Yeah. I want to go back. I want to go back where it's a little bit safer. And obviously that is a difficult place to be in terms of, I know, like you were saying, people don't want to look to the eventuality or the future. I go a step further occasionally and say, well, on your deathbed, do you want to be in a state of regret? Yeah. Or do you want to be content? That's obviously an extreme. Yeah. But when people have envisaged that, it's like, well, you would probably take the sense of, I've had a good life. Yeah. This is now the end. As opposed to today is, as we're talking Friday, the 15th of November, 2019, talk about 40 years in the future. What if I'd have done something different on that day? Yeah. That's regret. It's you don't want to contemplate it. You don't want to go there. And you don't want to feel that either disgust, distaste, anger towards yourself because it's too late. You can't do anything about it. So that's right. Obviously that's pushing a button from a coaching perspective to say, well, this is me giving you a wake up call in terms of this is the reason why to change. Do you want to feel one way or the other? Yeah. Is your opportunity. I'm not saying for you to do it. I'm not giving you recommendation or guidance. I'm pushing it back to you in terms of what do you think in terms of, is this okay or is it not? And then obviously from me as the coach, I can say, well, you either are ready to change or you're not. And I can step away and things like that. And I put it back on the onus on you as the individual. Yeah. It's commendable to obviously reach out to a coach in the first place because it takes a bigger man or woman to be aware that their circumstances are no longer acceptable. Yeah. They want to do something about it, but that's the ultimatum. You've got to go that step further. You've got to come up with the solutions to why is this no longer acceptable, as opposed to, like you were saying, the fix is I'm telling you what to do. Yeah. I'm spoon feeding you. I'm not helping you. We're not actually resolving the problem. We're probably masking and putting a Band-Aid over it, and that's it. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that gets to the difference between a good coach and a less good coach is in this context,
the coaches you hear about being, the coaches who go down in history for how amazing they are, and the players who, are almost in tears talking about what they did for them and the relationships they've had, whether it's, a coach in sport, a coach in life, a coach in your weight management, whatever it may be, the ones who just tell you what to do, that's not right. That is the quick fix approach. It may work. It may work certainly in the short run. So if that's really what you want, that if that's where you're at, okay. But understand it's going to work when they're working you, and then it won't. The ones who are really effective and what we're trained to do as, life coaches and that sort of thing is you're not giving them the answer. You're giving them the structure to arrive at the answer themselves. So one of the things I've always said is, people are like, oh, it must be so great changing people's lives. I don't change anybody's life. I give them the tools to change their own life, because I can't do that. I'm responsible for changing my own life, but I'm never going to change someone else's. If my words inspire something in you to look within you and find that path, and I can give you some tools to help you go down it, fantastic. But it's still you. And the reason is that whether it's on your deathbed or tomorrow, we shouldn't have to regret things, period. And of course, there are things we don't want to do. There's some things that we may find ourselves in the midst of saying, oh, hang on, this is not what I meant. I'm not happy about this. Well, you can course correct and you can change. You may have some level of regret for that. I say don't hold regret. Learn from what you did and why you did it so you can do differently. And then it's not about regret. It's about growth. So that on balance, if you were to weigh the things that you had to do that you didn't really enjoy and the things that you did enjoy, the did enjoy column should be much bigger. And so you can look back on your life at whatever point you do that and say, yeah, were there things I wish didn't happen? Of course. But on the whole, I'm really happy with how things worked out. And that's all we can ask for. And even the things you don't want to do, then why are you doing them? Because either it's not a good use of your time and we need to make different priority calls sometimes. And some of them, maybe it's facilitating what you do want to do. So like nobody likes paying their taxes or their mortgage or, the bills, that sort of thing. Well, do you like having a house? Do you like having heat in winter? Do you like having the clothes on your body so that you're not, on the streets naked and starving? Oh, okay. When you put it like that, yeah, I mean, that sounds a bit ridiculous, but that's why you're paying those bills. Or do you like that, for me, that my son has those things and feels safe and secure and is well fed and healthy? Yes. So of course I will pay those bills. Doesn't mean I enjoy the outflow of cash, but I certainly enjoy what it's doing for me. So then I don't have to look at it in the same light. And it's the same thing, the whole relationship with exercise. If you hate it because you don't enjoy it, then look at why you're doing it. And either you're doing the wrong thing, and we talked about, maybe there's some other thing that's more play and more enjoyable, or you're not focusing in on why you're doing it in the first place, which is not just sit on a machine for an hour and be miserable. It's because you want a better life, because you want to feel better again, because you want to come off all those pills, because you want to be there for your family, because whatever the reason is. And I do a lot of work with people on motivation, but it's not about being miserable on a machine for an hour right now. There are other reasons why you're there. Latch onto those, and suddenly that machine time or whatever you're doing becomes empowering, not demotivating. So it's all about this relationship we have with what's going on in our life. And to me, people ask me I've done a lot of podcasts, and my book, my first one's called Do a Day. So it's a lot of like, oh, what regrets do you have from the past? And I said, I don't, because if I did, I would be doing such a disservice to the life that I have right now. So why would I want to do that? Because I'm alive. So if I value that, and I do, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be here. How can I sit here and talk down, oh, this was terrible, I never should have done that? You hear people in divorce, there's a pretty common question is like, I never should have married your father. I never should have married your mother. It's like you're saying that to the child who exists because you did. Just pause for a second. People ask me like, I didn't get into my first choice of college or graduate school or whatever. It's like, oh, do you wish you'd gone to the other one? Well, going to this one meant I did this thing afterward, which meant I did this thing, which means I met my wife, which means my son exists, so when you start to think like that, why are you going to start moving the dominoes around? You can't live in utopia. Things will happen. So try to value why they happen. And if you appreciate where you're at right now, fantastic. Then appreciate where you've come from. And if you don't, what are you going to do differently so you end up appreciating where you're at? These are all choices. Not easy, but they are choices.
Well, you raise a good one in terms of, and I think this goes nicely with what you said there, Brian, in terms of listening to my interview I did with with Drew Tadia a
Yeah.
few years ago, and relation versus what we did. I think it was like a couple of days ago when I was recording this.
Tuesday. Yeah.
It's night and day. The story is somewhat similar, but you picked up upon the anger in my voice. It's like resentment versus growth in terms of what you're talking about. So obviously, I've come to probably gone full circle.
Yeah.
Accepted what all the I'll call them choices that you said, be it good or bad in the past, and I have to move on. It's a bit of a domino effect. The choices you make, you have to come to accept them and go with the flow, as I like to term it, and not look back, because you can't change it. The past is the past. The future you can have some an impression on it. But you can't look back, because for good or bad, those are the choices you made. You chose to go left as opposed to right. Yeah. Yes, you would have a different alternate reality. Yeah. But we don't know if those actually exist. But that's a different topic altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the word after we record, I was reflecting on that piece for our conversation. I think what comes across today versus that interview, and obviously that's like a snippet of who you were at that time. So I'm extrapolating, but there's a comfort in who you are that I could sense, like something wasn't aligned yet. Like you were at this point of not feeling quite as comfortable as now. You do seem you're in it. You're comfortable with it. There's an energy to you as well, but there's this comfort. It's not, it's not like a hyperactive energy. It's like, just I think feeling comfortable.
Well, I think I've come, like you were saying, it's you are accepting of your true self. I'm not trying to be something that I am not. I'm not trying to appease other people, which I think I probably was at that time or another, because it was, you're trying to find your place within social media, and you're trying to, I must be something else that I'm not to get people to quote unquote like me, which I don't say I don't care, but I'll be me. I'll be as truthful to me as I can physically as possible, to be it my friends and family who take the piss out of me if I did something stupid. And I don't take that seriously. I'll take the knock on the chin. Move on. Obviously, social media is a beast in itself. It's difficult I don't know you, but you're giving me harsh criticism, and I don't like it. But I think I've got off that high horse and said, even if it is criticism, if it's posed in the right way, it's like, it's something to improve upon. And I think just telling that story, it's easy, because even things, as we talked about off air, before and after we talked, there's stuff I've got close to my chest that even friends and family don't know about. So to be able to share that, it's for me, it's firsthand knowledge. I've lived it, but nobody else knows about it. So it's quite empowering because I put out a couple of days ago in terms of dealing with my own weight issues. People were shocked to see. It's like, oh, you were somewhat overweight. Yeah, because I didn't talk about it, because I was, I'm not saying embarrassed. I was disgusted, because I wanted, it's like, I think I was about 80 kilos, so about 160, 170 pounds. Yeah. For me, I'd never been in that realms of being that heavy. Yeah. It's not acceptable. I need to be here. What am I going to do about it? And I went too far the other way, and I lost too much weight. Yeah. And that probably had a massive impact on my mental health. So now it's like, well, you want to be this certain weight. Yeah. I don't want to be overweight. I want to be in this nice middle ground from like quote unquote comfort. But I will say to people, well, yes, you want to get down here. Yeah. However, if you go too far to the extreme, it's going to have impact on your mental health. So you need to have some sort of allowances, flexibility, adaptability to your overall journey and process. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, do you want to be miserable being fat?
Yeah.
Or do you want to be miserable and being skinny? So they're exactly the same from a mental perspective.
Yeah.
Obviously, people will say, well, how did you get there? And they'll be envious of being skinny, but they'll loathe you as being heavy. But how you feel in your own self is exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really well said. It's interesting. You talked about the skinny side. I started losing weight, almost uncontrollably at one point. Like I think as part of it's the way I had built my exercise routine. I was doing a lot of like 10 to 20 minute, fairly intense cardio sessions throughout the day, in addition to like weights and body weight activity in the morning. So my metabolism was really, really amped up, and I was eating in a way that fueled that further. And so I just kept dropping weight, and I got into the 160s, which for me is too low. I got down into the low 160s, which is way too low. And I was very open about my weight. I posted it every day. And one of my old college roommates commented, he's like, yeah, you can do it, man. Keep going. And I was like, no, like this is now threatening my wellness. Like I'm in, and I can't stop. Like I was going and buying ice cream, which I would never eat. I'm like, I got to do something. So I'm like, how can I just get calories? And I had the ice cream and my weight dropped the next day. I'm like, what am I going to do? I tried like donuts. I mean, it was amazing and horrible at the same time, but I couldn't stop. So I had to change the workout situation, because I realized like, okay, I'm just amping up my metabolism way too much. But it's so funny to me how on social media, people just equate like, oh, lower numbers, that's great. You see people who are battling with anorexia and people like, oh, you look great. It's like, no, they're really struggling and they're underweight and this is unhealthy. Their hair's falling out and you're telling them they look great because they're really skinny. It is, back to the social media point and the opinion of others and the guidance of others. If I succumb to that pressure, then I would have been like, oh, maybe it is good. Maybe I should keep doing this. Maybe I should add another 15-minute sprinting session to the mix or something.
Well, I think you raise a good point there, Bryan, in terms of, that you're trying to live up to somebody else's expectations of yourself.
Yeah.
And you trying to bring that number down more and more. Are you doing it for the gratification that it gives, the bit like the dopamine effect of getting those, like, obviously social media companies are starting to do something about that. Obviously from a business perspective, that's a different story altogether, but that's the one we can probably talk about together. But from a sense of people getting, obviously, a virtual pat on their back or keep going, you're doing well, that's going to obviously give them a boost as to, well, what I'm doing is justified. If I keep going, keep losing, people are going to be in my corner. And obviously from a coach perspective, you can look at different numbers, different analytics. Like, well, this number on the scales is not the be all and end all, and it's trying to get people to envision. Yes, okay, if that number's kind of stagnated and isn't dropping any further, that's not a big deal. But coming back on what I was saying, that's quite a vicious circle, because people are going to have a reason to keep redlining it and pushing the extremes, because they're kind of getting an ego boost. It's like, well done.
Yeah.
But you're not looking at the warning signs that your body's probably going to give you.
Yeah. And, to be fair to him, I don't want to call him out, but, I had been open about my weight through the whole process, from the 222 down into the 180s and then 170s. And he wasn't reading the post. He just saw the number and was like, hey, go Bryan. And through that whole process, people were really supportive. And I used that to my advantage. That's the main reason I put it out there, because through my life, my weight had been a shaming and make fun of me kind of thing. It wasn't a positive. And so here I am taking control of it. I had this, I wasn't a big social media user before. I became bigger in it because the network I had was people I know and liked. So I didn't have to worry about the random person snickering at me, because this is my friends and family, so they will support me. And I need it to do what I'm trying to do. So I did get a lot of outpouring of support through the process. And I became hooked on that to an extent. Like, it's not that I needed it, but I certainly appreciated it. And so that's why I kept posting even after I was, months and months within my goal weight, and clearly health was not going to be an issue for me anymore. My weight certainly wasn't. Why did I keep posting? What was I looking for? And so his post did two things for me. One is in thinking about how to respond to him, it had me reflecting more about what do I do about this? And, at that point I had become a certified personal trainer. So I had more of an understanding of the calories and the way things were burning and my metabolism management and that. So it was a good wake up to just sort of structure things differently. But that was the last time I posted my weight on a daily basis. Actually, I don't know that I ever posted my weight again, except like when I would write reflective posts about, here I am, it's 3 years later or 5 years later, or I just came off the marathon. This is, the total place my life is at. My weight is this. And, but that's when it struck me as like, what am I looking for? Cause I don't need the support of like, you can do it, Bryan, keep going. Cause actually I'm supporting myself. I don't need anyone else's cheers. It's very nice. Don't get me wrong. Like I appreciate people being nice and kind and positive or thinking they are. But it was a good wake up call for me is like, hang on, what are you actually using this for anymore? Is it serving you? Are you behaving in a way that aligns to your values or not? And so that was the last time I posted it. And I did explain to him, I was like, no, actually, this is a problem. I should be like 10 to 15 pounds heavier. Something's not right. So I need to go in the other direction. And I think he wrote back like a laughing, smiling face. And like, okay, I don't know what to make of that, but I just walked away from it.
Yeah, but I think that's where obviously knowledge and being aligned to certain people does help, because they can read between the lines in terms of he's just picked out the number. I think you as coaches will scan the entirety of the content as to what's the reason behind going down that route, and obviously come up with a response accordingly. So I think I do it on social media, but I will read it in terms of, well, I've done this because of blah, blah, blah. And this is where I'm at currently. So I'll say, keep going, because you're probably not at your end goal.
Yeah.
So it gives you not reassurance, but it gives you
a bit,
a certain aspect from a professional to say, well, you're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
You might be working with another trainer, or you might be doing it yourself, but you're going in the right direction for what's going to be a health and well-being standpoint, and not just for the sake of dropping a number.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that's absolutely right. Even, for me, even when I go to my annual physical, the physician's not really offering me anything around my weight, my diet, anything like that. They give me general comments, and then they find out, they're like, make sure you're not drinking too much and don't smoke and watch your red meat intake. It's like, well, I haven't had a drop of alcohol in 6.5 years. Not that I was a big drinker before, but I just don't drink. I've never smoked in my life, and I'm a vegan. So yeah, I'm doing okay on the red meat part. That's not a problem. And so it's just like, their standard responses. It's all well-intentioned. But, again, I take ownership of my well-being. And then so I have a good relationship with my primary care doctor, my GP at this point, where we sort of collaborate on what blood tests to run, because there are a lot more things I want to be aware of. So I know, do I need to adjust my diet as I get older? Our hormones change, lots of things change, my stress situations change, whatever. I want to be more informed than the average bear. And so I want to see, what's going on with that. And he's been really good about that. He doesn't have a lot to add, but he's at least a partner to me owning my situation. And my wife's a functional medicine health coach. Just on the back of her chronic illness journey, she really saved her own life. And what she learned through that, she ended up getting certified. And so she helps other people battling chronic illness today. So, she gives me a lot of guidance as well about, like, you need to get this test. Let's look at the results, and I bring them home. And, but yeah, I have someone who I can turn to help me with it in the doctor, but then I have myself who I ultimately have to turn to. And I find empowerment and support in the right places. But I own my wellness. People say the term like be the CEO of your own health. And I think that's really important. We can't just rest that in someone else and just expect them to cure us or give us that pill that, maybe makes us feel better, but it may not be doing anything for our lifestyle, our wellness, whatever. And, you find yourself down the road with these wake up moments we talk about. Are you living the way you really wish you want to and could? That's a personal thing.
But then, Bryan, do you think you and I, to a certain extent, are unconventional when it comes to that mold?
Yeah. I mean, so I think unconventional, it's funny. If you really go back, I think that was convention. I mean, like way, way back, so it's like we talk about organic versus conventional produce. And actually, organic was conventional. Everything was organic back in the day. But now what we call like conventional is actually the scientifically modified changed process, and organic is the different thing, even though that's the term conventional means like the original way of doing it. So I think this is how it used to be, maybe thousands of years ago, maybe not anytime recently, but I do, and it could be because I live in a bit of a bubble in this space, but I do feel like there is a movement more and more towards this. Like obesity awareness, the problem is still hugely out of control, or diabetes, the diabetes, obesity confluence that you see. But there is more conversation about it. There are actions being taken. I don't know if we've moved the needle enough yet that the momentum's in the right direction, but there was no momentum not long ago. And, the plant-based movement is growing dramatically. There's a number of things happening that, while it's still probably not the convention, it is becoming more and more normal, or more and more, there are more options. So I think that there's a shift going on, but it's conversations like this and the work that, that you're doing, that I'm doing. I think these are part of that equation and moving back to maybe the way things were 1,000 years ago. I keep like going back to Greece, like, people, if you're going to wear a toga, you have to look good in that, right? Because part of your pecs are showing or whatever, like you have to stay on top of it. And maybe that's just what it is in the movies. But I do think there's at least a portion of the population globally is moving back in that direction. And I think that's a good thing. And I'm happy to be part of that journey.
But why do you think it's taken so long to have that shift? Because as we're recording, and this is something I didn't know until I was at my leg appointment at the hospital yesterday. It was actually Diabetes Awareness Day yesterday, and I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. That's an ironic point to this whole thing. Yeah. I wonder if is that global? I'm looking for an out of why I didn't know, because I'm not in the UK.
I'd have to probably Google it, but I wasn't aware. Yeah. But then you've always got these days that come out of the blue on a social media perspective. It might just be in the UK. It might be not a global one. But I'm thinking, so I posted about it because it's, where I was at is my community that I work with. So it's like, make you aware as to the factors that obviously dictate towards diabetes, like ethnicity, age, BMI. I can't remember what the other one is. Another one. It'll come back to me, but I think
family history, maybe
family history, and then whether or not you've had it in the past. But I was quite surprised. I think one of the factors you were saying 50% of it was preventable. I thought all of it with type 2 diabetes were preventable. So that's a bias that I have that people wouldn't have known of.
I don't know if the 50% is the right number. I know that's the convention, but there's people who have evidence that type 1 diabetes is preventable. Just because you have the biology for it doesn't mean it has to be presenting itself in the same way, or that you have to manage it with medication, maybe in some cases. But type 2 diabetes by definition it's lifestyle based, and it doesn't mean that you can fully escape it no matter what. I know people who live unbelievably healthy and they still die in their 50s of cancer or heart attack, or like things can still happen, but your preponderance goes down dramatically. The likelihood of it expressing itself or becoming the norm goes down. So why wouldn't you want that? It's a whole other conversation, but it is, Now, it's interesting, our awareness of these things. So why do I think it's taken so long? I think even like that self-work, I think a lot of people still need a kick in the pants. I did. My aim is to help people not have to get kicked down to be able to wake up. It's, in some respects, it can be easier if you have one of those moments because, you have no choice anymore. You still have a choice. You just may not perceive it anymore. It's like, well, now I have to do something. Well, you still don't. You're just going to lead down a different path that you just don't want to go down anymore. And you see that where you couldn't before. But no one that I coach had one of these moments. None of them has had a gun put in their face or, near death or any of that. Those people generally aren't getting coaching. They are the ones doing the coaching or speaking or writing books or whatnot. Some obviously get help. But my aim is to help those people who aren't in those positions who are just feeling that discomfort. They at least are like, this just it's not what I want. And I don't know what I want and I don't know how to do anything about it. And anytime I've talked about it before, I've failed. So I need someone to help me figure out how I can do this. I think that's the best time to do it because it's much better to do it when you don't have a dramatic fall down.
I testified to that.
Yeah,
exactly. Because I've seen rock bottom, and okay, to some degree, somebody might have a worse rock bottom than me or somewhat better.
Yeah.
But ideally, if I've never had to endure it in the first place, I'd have taken that option. I think everybody would be the same.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by this question, James, that whenever I have people on, would you go back and not have this happen? And I have yet to interview anyone who says yes. Like, oh yeah, I wish. What they wish is that, if there were other people who were hurt, if there was, someone who lived through like some dramatic like terrorist attack or something, and, many people died. Of course, they're not wishing for that to still be the case. But what they don't give up is their own experience and how they've grown. And my wife and I say this too, is like, of course we wish like our son didn't have to witness the near death of his mother, that, it's impacted his childhood because we have a lot of things we need to be careful about, things we don't do, that wouldn't it be nice if he had a more quote unquote normal childhood? Now, if you ask him, he's happy and he doesn't have a problem with any of it. But, there are things we wish were different from that perspective, but we don't wish away the process. We don't wish away the learning. I wish she wasn't in pain like that. I wish she wasn't scared, all those things. But if that's what it took, what we have today is so important. If there's no other way for us to have it, we wouldn't give it up. And I feel really strongly about that. So I understand sometimes it does take that, but it doesn't mean you necessarily will learn as a result of it. That becomes the choice. And so I'm thankful that we woke up to that kick. Not everyone does. But if you are in that kind of place where you're at rock bottom, or it feels like you are, then use that as a catalyst, not as the extra push to go all the way out. Like, you don't have to be at the end right now. And it doesn't matter if anyone else has it worse or better, but people get into these comparisons. You're not in their shoes, so it's not relevant. And you don't have to feel bad for feeling bad about your situation. Just recognize there's another path. So let's talk about what that is. Who cares what anyone else experienced or didn't experience? That's just not relevant because it's not your life. So this is, and we can do something with that.
I think that's a great message to live there by, because it's like, I think we are in a world that's ever trying to compete in every capacity of the word. You never have a momentary lapse to yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're always looking for something to compare against in one capacity or the other. It's like, that's probably my downfall, but I've been able to move gradually away from it. It's like, well, from a competitive standpoint, that button never goes off. Yeah. However, in certain arenas, it needs to be dampened because it's not productive. It's not serving me, and it's actually being destructive. It's like, dampen that down. You don't need to compare with somebody else. It might even be a different coaching what they're offering altogether.
Yeah,
that's not a comparison. You're not in my space. That's okay. You're doing well. Good on you. I'll give you the support that you need. because it's being the bigger person, because that's what we don't do. But I'm not going to compare and contrast what we're doing, because that's going to make me feel bad, and obviously go down a different path altogether. And obviously the isolation one, it's like, well, my work's not very good. I'm going to detract, hide myself away from the big bad world and hide behind the computer. But I think where I've kind of shined towards it is probably the competitive element. How can I make myself better? What are standards I expect of myself, of other people? And then this is the norm. This is the minimum expectation of, be it the community that you want to work with, and the I'll call it the entourage, but be it the more people you have within that inner circle. This is the minimum standard. If you can't live up to that expectation, it's you that have to change, not the group. And I think that's where we need to probably take something from that and move forward, because obviously I think I mentioned to you on your show in terms of, well, if it's not good enough for me to consume, is it good enough for somebody else to learn from? And I think that's a lesson for everybody to take home, for be it your coach, clients, athletes. If you wouldn't quote unquote buy it, it's not good enough.
Yeah. Well said. I get nothing to add to that. I think that's brilliant.
So in terms of asking you like the penultimate question then, Bryan, to you before we wrap up the show, from a coaching perspective, be it, and this is a question that I've asked not so much to people that have come on, but I'll pose it to you anyway. Be it, if there'd be anybody dead or alive that you would want to sit down with, who would that be?
It's the guy whose podcast I mentioned before, and his name's Rich Roll. So people ask me why I'm a vegan, and I always say it's because of a man crush, but it's because of Rich. I've taken so much from his journey, his story, his writing, and his show. So yeah, there's that would be pretty amazing for me. I find so much inspiration and guidance in what he's been through and how he shares that. So that, I think that's a pretty easy one for me to answer. Whether it's a great answer or not, it's my answer. So I'm not bothered by it, but I know, I even just to say thank you means a lot. So just that chance to do that for him, not for him, really for me, just to know that I'm paying that gratitude, that would mean a lot. So I'd be really thankful for that.
And my final question to you before we wrap up the show is, if you had to summarize what we've been speaking about today into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
We all have this opportunity to move ahead. And the way you can do that is by looking within, valuing yourself.
So once again, Bryan, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
Yeah, thanks, James, for having me on.
It's been my absolute pleasure.
If you like this episode, please do share it with your friend, and do let Bryan and I know what you thought of the episode by tagging us over on Instagram at Bryan Falchuk. That's BryanFalchuk and at James O. Roberts 11. And again, you can do the same on Twitter and Facebook. And if you had any additional questions, don't hesitate to shoot them over as well. And finally, don't forget to check out his website, www.bryanfalchuk.com. And also don't forget to check out his book, Do a Day, as well as his weekly podcast by the same name. And as always, do check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk and click on the tab Resources. But not forgetting, I've also started a new Facebook group, especially for the podcast, which you can find by typing The Mindset Athlete. So make sure to check those links out. They will be in the description. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.lipson.com under the category General. So once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Mindset Athlete podcast.